Nosferatu is the totally unauthorized adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula. It went on to become one of the most popular and iconic silent films ever made, to be honest. As a result of it becoming so iconic, it has a very recent remake, which I'm sure is where a lot of you have heard of it. If not, you've probably heard of him from SpongeBob. All this about Nosferatu and more on the Golden Hour Film Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of 2025 of the Golden Hour Film Podcast. Yes, it is that classic recurring character from SpongeBob, Nosferatu, who we are talking about today. And when I say we, I'm referring to me, and of course, for the first time this year, my co-host, not guest host, Shane Mulvaney. Shane, what's the crack? How are you?
Happy New Year, everyone. Happy New Year, Harry.
Happy New Year, Shane. We are definitely not recording this before the New Year, so that doesn't not feel weird at all, I swear. But yeah, first of all, first question. Was your first ever exposure to Nosferatu, was it SpongeBob?
It probably was, but wasn't a big SpongeBob guy back as a child, so it probably was, but I can't remember, to be honest. I think I just knew that Nosferatu was like an absolute it's a rip-off of Dracula, and I knew the Dracula story, so from that point of view I knew what Nosferatu was and what it was based on, etc, etc.
Yeah, it's interesting covering this, having already covered the 1930s Dracula, because you really do see the similarities. Like, there's a lot of similarities. There's a couple of differences, and these aren't necessarily spoilers, but a couple of differences. Instead of like 1890s London, it's set in like 1830s Germany. The name of the titular vampire is actually not Dracula, but it's also not Nosferatu either. That was actually a totally made up word, allegedly, that Bram Stoker just kept coming across when he was actually researching Dracula. No, the common misconception, the vampire in this movie is Count Orlok, played by Max Schreck. Yes, that is who Shrek was named after. In one of the most iconic physical performances we've probably covered on the podcast to date. I think as far as like physical performances go, it's one of the best.
Yeah, 100%. And like, we are in the silent era, so obviously physical mannerisms were like what you had to do back then. Like, we saw it with the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari in particular, with Conrad Vaight's performance as Cesare, not Caesar, as we were saying.
And he was the first choice for Count Orlok.
Was he really?
He was the first choice, which I think is an interesting one as well, because I think the actor who played the actual titular Dr. Caligari, I feel like his performance in that movie is quite similar to the guy who plays Knock in this movie. I feel like they're very similar performances.
Yeah, I can see
Knock
that,
is this film's Renfield. We'll go through each character as we go through the movie and say who is who, but yeah, he's Renfield.
Just quick note about last week's episode, by the way. I did mention that Billy Wilder is the first person in history to win Best Director, Best Script, and Best Picture for the same film. That's half true. He's the first person to win Best Director, Best Picture, and Best Original Screenplay. So he actually won Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Director, and Best Picture for The Last Weekend. And a couple of Joseph L. Mankiewicz won it a couple of times for Adapted Screenplays. I think Leo McCarey won for Best Story. So it was half true what I said. Because when I said that last week, and by the way, I was kind of going through the timestamps, just getting ready for this episode, for the apartment, for last week's episode, and I heard myself saying that and I was like, is that actually true? That feels a bit off, so I went back and checked.
There's nothing worse than finding a mistake that you say on this and not having any, you have no way of fixing it. Like, you said it and it's in the recordings, like you can't like unsay it. It's like, oh shit, you just pray that nobody picks up on it, like when I got World War One wrong in my French video. God, so did I get some stick for that, particularly on Reddit.
We are recording this like in advance, so the apartment episode, by the way, hasn't even dropped yet, just to pull back the curtain.
I know you're going to get stick for that. I just want
to preempt that. Oh no, it's already happened. It's the whole weird thing going on. I want to preempt it by saying I'm actually ahead of the curve here. I actually know that's
we are recording this on the 16th of December.
Yes, so for scheduling purposes. But yeah, I'm sure someone in the comments has probably said something about that, and that's fair enough. But I just want it on record that I have acknowledged it, and yeah, I'm half right, but also I'm wrong at the same time. So I acknowledge that it's not exactly the truth.
Also, and Shane, I actually didn't even mention this to you, but you may notice, and I'll send this on to you after we record. But the graphic is different this year for 2025. I put way more effort in this year.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
So the graphic that the people are watching from home of us chatting, actually, I put way more effort in this year. Don't worry. We may make it an annual thing where I like the Guinness logo slightly tweaks every year.
Yeah, glow
but
up.
yeah, it's a massive glow up in my opinion. So yeah, I tried.
Fair play. Now, you're way better at that graphic design stuff than I am. So I mean, trust me, if it was left to me, like it'd be like something that looks like from the 1990s. Honestly, like it's crazy.
Yeah. And yeah, I reckon, have you much about the production of Nosferatu, or do you want to just get straight into it?
No, I just thought it was interesting when I read that Count Orlok is only seen blinking once, which is near the end of Act 1. I just thought that was interesting because obviously, again, that's coming back to the idea that the performance itself is very mannered and very over the top. So obviously, it's an interesting choice. But it's not one that I necessarily kind of caught on that when I was actually watching the film, but it's interesting to kind of think of actually when you're just watching it or when you're kind of discussing it, I suppose.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say as well is obviously it's actually quite well known, so I'll kind of fly through it, but the widow of Bram Stoker wanted all of the money from this because it was, as I said, a completely unauthorized adaptation of his novel. But the movie was a huge box office bomb. It actually made no money, and the production company that made it went bust. So instead, she demanded that all copies of the movie be destroyed. So this was very nearly one of the many instances of a lost movie that we would never have gotten to see. But thankfully, enough people kept their copies in good tact and didn't throw it out as per, well, I guess, legislation. So they kind of broke the law. But hey, we got Nosferatu as a result in this day and age. We can still watch it. It's fantastic. I'm a big fan of the movie. Quick spoiler for review. I'm a big fan of the movie. As far as like silent films go, I am definitely harsher on silent films than sound films. I don't know about you, but I do struggle to get into them more. Sure, you could just call me like stupid, but like it's a fact. I just struggle to get into them as much. There's ones that I like absolutely love, like two from Germany to be specific, Metropolis and The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari are like 5 out of 5s for me, if not 4.5. They are both like absolute masterpieces, and I didn't give this 5 out of 5, but I still really liked it. And I think Max Schreck in particular is like so iconic. Just one thing he does with his performance, the way he like tucks his elbows in, he kind of like gives himself this weird these weird proportions where his shoulders seem enormous and his waist seems tiny and like his arms seem so long, and then obviously he's got the big prosthetic fingers as well. But just his physical performance is amazing, and I kind of forgot how much I liked this until he showed up in it, and then I was like, yes, Count Orlok is class in this. What about you?
Yeah, no, I'm kind of similar to you in that, like, what I do actually, this year I'm going to make it more of an effort to get into some silent films. In particular, there's a 4.5 hour Fritz Lang movie called Dr. Mabuse the Gambler. I think there's another sequel to that as well.
Yeah, that's on my list as well. I just don't know when I'm going to watch it.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's the time. Maybe it is available in 2 different parts, I think, so maybe I just have to do it that way. But I'm going to try and get the 4.5 version. I'll watch that once if I can, just because I think it'd be cool to kind of experience it. But Fritz Lang, yeah, he's someone that I do want to get into anyway.
Let us know at home if you want to see Shane make a video about that, because I feel like making a video on watching a 4.5 hour silent video is like a 4.5 hour silent film would be a cool 7 or 8 minute video. Because yeah, Metropolis itself is 3 hours in fairness, but like Metropolis is amazing. So I'm sure there is plenty of other silent films that I am going to find amazing. But yeah.
And that's another one I have to see.
That'll be an interesting video, I think.
I haven't seen it either, so that's another one I absolutely have to watch. Silent films in particular, for me, I think it really does massively come down to the music for me. Like, I think we talked about The Lodger a couple of weeks ago, maybe on one of the episodes, where it's like, I really enjoyed the story and it's really well made and there's some really great Hitchcockian elements to it. But the version I watched at least is the music. And again, I doubt this was the music used at the time, because Well, it's much
Yeah, it
more
wouldn't have
modern
been. It would have
music,
been like
yeah,
a classic
yeah.
band.
So
Yeah,
like
so.
for some reason the music, so whoever decided for the music on the version I watched is an idiot, to be honest, because it completely did not fit the tone of the story at all, and it was taking me off it so often. So I think, whereas in this, I will say I enjoyed the score a lot in Nosferatu. I think it really adds to the story, especially as the film progresses and as we get to the more dramatic elements. So yeah, that's probably one of the biggest things for it that means that I actually did really enjoy this film. So yeah, no, I was spoiler free review, but I was really positive on this film. I did enjoy it quite a lot.
Yeah, fantastic. And I reckon we get on into it. Act 1, and yeah, we are in a German town of Wisburg, which is seeing a great death. Yes, the Black Plague and all that is kind of a recurring theme in this, a bit of a motif, because it's how the news tend to report whenever Orlok seems to strike, because he seems to rack up a body count in this movie, mainly off screen, but he manages to really cause some havoc whenever he gets going. But yeah, we are learning about this, the great death that happened in Wisburg, and we learn about this young couple named Hutter and Ellen. And Hutter works for, well, first of all, yeah, these are this film's equivalents to Mina and John. And yeah, John, or in this film, Hutter, kind of takes on a bit of Renfield's arc as well.
Yeah,
It's not a straightforward adaptation. There's just a lot of very obvious adapting going on here. But yeah, it is a somewhat different story, and particularly with the main male protagonist in this film, with Hutter, who works for Knock, who is the local estate agent, and he is looking to sell a house across the way from Hutter's house to Count Orlok of Transylvania. And yeah, the guy who plays Knock plays it so insane. Like, it's a proper
Demented.
like horror film in the silent era performance. He is absolutely bonkers in this, and he's just constantly laughing. And yeah, he basically says to Hutter, listen, this guy's got a lot of money, and we learned that Knock actually pays his employees very well as well, which is interesting. But he's like, yeah, this guy has a lot of money, so you're gonna head to the land of phantoms and thieves, I believe he says, which is just an interesting thing to call Romania. But he says you are off to Transylvania, and you are gonna basically close the deal on Count Orlok getting the house literally opposite your own house. And yeah, Hutter's pretty ecstatic at this news. He's happy to kind of go on this grand adventure, and the only thing is he has to go and tell his wife Ellen, and she's not quite as pleased, I don't think.
No, yeah, she's pretty distraught. Actually, it's kind of a weird reaction because it's like she can.
She's a bit of an anxious mess.
Yeah, it's like she can foresee something, not necessarily in a clairvoyant way, but it's almost like she can sense that something bad is about to happen. I don't know why. It's not really overplayed, but it's definitely there in the kind of subtext of the scene. And they actually say that she's left grief stricken. They leave her with Harding and Harding's wife. I think Harding again also takes on kind of the Richard E. Grant. If you've seen Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula, that's kind of the Richard E. Grant role in a way. So yeah, he's kind of like the friend who may or may not actually have feelings for. Well, maybe that's more the Bram Stoker version, but in the Bram Stoker version,
not in this film. This guy's just a wealthy extra, if anything.
Yeah, not in this film, but in the Bram Stoker version, yeah, he actually maybe has feelings for the Lucy character. But anyway, Hutter then gets on his way and he's on the road to Transylvania. Couple of scenes of like horses in peril and stuff because they have to start braving the kind of harsh conditions of the place. And then when he reaches the Carpathian Mountains, because of the terrain, he kind of has to stop, and he goes into a little inn and he's kind of having a meal and he's having a drink and whatever, and he gets into conversation with some of the locals, and when he mentions that he's going to Count Orlok's castle, very similar to the Bela Lugosi film from 1931.
Yeah.
They just are appalled, they are terrified, they are mad, and they're like, you cannot go there. They say werewolves haunt these woods. So yeah, they're trying to warn Hutter at this moment not to pursue this journey, just to turn back, head home. But of course, he's having none of it. He's like, we'll just stop like this. That's just a myth. That's just a fairy tale that doesn't exist. So He starts to read about vampires and ghosts and the seven deadly sins. And then he starts to read also about Nosferatu, who leeches off the Black Death. So he's starting to kind of peel back the curtain about like the kind of, is it a myth? Is it not about this Black Death? Is it about Nosferatu? But I think at this point in time, he's basically disbelieving of the whole myth about it. He believes it's just a myth.
Yeah, and when we see that night the so-called werewolf, which is quite clearly a hyena, but like I wonder if people back then just had never seen a hyena before. It's interesting to think, but yeah, it's clearly a hyena. But we see the werewolf going out like scaring horses off and everything, but when we go back to Hutter, he actually just kind of passes it all off as nothing and goes to bed. He gets a sound night's sleep because he wakes up and he's like a classic silent actor. He wakes up and he does the big stretch and the big like smile and yawn and everything. And yeah, he picks up the book again and like really dramatically throws it on the floor. Basically, he's like, "Yeah, no, fuck this. I don't believe this." And he gets into a cart where two lads decide to take him off towards Count Orlok's castle. But once they get past a certain period, they really start to sense there's some bad omens in the air. And again, similar enough to what happened in the Bela Lugosi film, the lads are like, "Nah, you cannot pay me any amount of money to take you further. You are walking the rest of the way." So they send him on his way, and he crosses a bridge. And once he crosses the bridge, in clear, like, fast forwarded, but still, the effect is fun, at least. We see a horse and cart just bolt down the mountain towards him, and it gets up to him, and we see definitely not Count Orlok in disguise. It is a totally normal-looking man dressed up as Robin Hood who is riding this cart, and he takes him on board, and he's like, "I'll take you." And yeah, he uses his supernatural abilities because, okay, yeah, it is Count Orlok in disguise, just not a very good disguise. And they bolt back to the castle at full speed, and he takes him to the castle, which is pretty cool. Like it's a low-budget film, so they very much shot on location the whole way through. So they shot on location at this castle, and they get there, and the fella driving the cart, who is definitely not Orlok in disguise, just disappears, and then Orlok basically greets him. And I feel like there's so many shots of Count Orlok in this film, just standing there or walking, or one where he like rises like Aleister Black, which is so iconic. And yeah, this one in particular, just because he basically comes out of the shadows. And as I said earlier, Mark Schreck does this thing with his posture where his shoulders are huge, but his waist is tiny, and his arms look like twice the length that they should be. As well, he's got the prosthetic fingers and everything, so he just looks like genuinely quite haunting. And Hutter sees him, and he's like, "Oh, this is not a normal looking dude." And the guy is like, I'm Count Orlok. It doesn't do the Bela Lugosi thing. It's a silent film as well. He doesn't ham it up or anything too much, but he basically says, "All the servants have gone to sleep. Come on in." And they go on in, and this is where we start to see Count Orlok being a little bit weird. He's quite open in comparison to what Dracula was like. He's quite open with just being a bit of a weird guy. He says like so early in conversation, "Yeah, no, I actually sleep during the day and I roam the place at night." And he just like he keeps making these weird little comments where it's like so obviously there's something up with this guy, but Hutter tries his best to downplay it all.
Yeah, Gary Oldman in that Francis Ford Coppola film, it's probably closer to this than it is to the Bela Lugosi in terms of at this like point in the film and this point in the story, in the narrative, whatever you want to call it, where I think this film is definitely, like you say, it's Count Orlok. Sorry, I was thinking of Dracula. Count Orlok, yeah, he's not exactly trying to hide the fact that he's kind of a weird dude. There's something shifty going on. And Gary Oldman in that film is kind of on a similar wavelength at this point. But anyway, they're kind of going over the pamphlets about like this house that they want to show Orlok, which is obviously right across the street from Hutter's own house.
By the way, we are currently now in Act 2. So the two of them sit down and they have a meal, and it's a pretty grand looking banquet, if I'm honest. And then all of a sudden this like skeleton clock goes off, which startles Hutter. And he's cutting bread at the time, so he cuts his finger, and similar to all the Dracula movies, Orlok like leaps out of his chair and just starts coming towards him and getting closer to him. Basically, he wants to suck his thumb. And Hutter, at this point, realizes, maybe you are a bit weird. And he backs off and kind of backs off into a chair. And just as people used to do in the 20s, as we've discussed on this podcast, he just faints on the spot. And he wakes up and it's morning time. There is a full table of dinner in the room, and he takes out a mirror because he feels something on his neck, and he sees what is clearly vampire bites. But he kind of giggles it off, and he's like, nothing.
Yeah, and then he goes for a walk around the castle grounds, still not too suspecting of anything in particular at this point. So he starts writing a letter to Ellen because he knows that she's obviously kind of missing him and he's missing her, etc., etc. So he then starts to tell her about these 2 neck bites, and he's like, I'm sure it was just mosquito bites. So
yeah,
he's kind of
2 mosquito bites that were just really close
together. Yeah, it's a hell of a coincidence. Yeah. So then we go back a little bit further forward. We go to the evening again, and then again Hutter's showing Orlok the property, but then a pin of Ellen falls out. Similar to, again, I don't want to keep name checking the Francis Ford Coppola one, but that does kind of borrow a bit from this as well as kind of other Dracula adaptations. This is when a pin of Ellen falls out, and as soon as Orlok sees it, he immediately gravitates towards Ellen.
Yeah.
So he picks it up, and then he starts to compliment her neck. Not exactly. It's pretty weird fetish.
Not the first thing you'd point out, if I'm honest.
No.
Like,
listen,
yeah,
I don't
strange comment to make.
Yeah, I don't want to kink shame anyone, but if that's his kink, then fair play to him. But then he's like, okay, as soon as he sees this picture of Ellen, he's like, okay, fair enough. I'll buy the house across from the street from you. So that's interesting timing. But then Hutter starts reading about Nosferatu's quote elixir of life, which turns out to be human blood. And he opens his door, and who is kind of standing outside looking again shifty as hell? Count Orlok.
Class. Yes. And then we get the SpongeBob scene where Count Orlok comes in and opens the door, and no, he does not flick a light switch up and down over and over again like he did in SpongeBob. That was an addition in SpongeBob. No, in here, he just comes in and he does what he does a few times in this film, and I feel like every time it's executed well, where he's off camera, but his shadow looms over someone, and it basically insinuates what he's doing. And yeah, poor old Hutter is cowering in the corner as Orlok comes closer and closer to him. And at this point, it would be safe to assume that Hutter's dead, but no, he's just rendered unconscious from this particular interaction with Mr. Orlok. And yeah, when he wakes up then, and he kind of has no idea what to do, and he runs to the nearest window, and he sees outside that Orlok is loading a load of coffins onto the back of a trailer. Not suspicious at all. And Orlok heads off, and he hasn't a clue what to do, so he just dives out the window and knocks himself unconscious.
Yeah, meanwhile, Ellen wakes up during this whole... It seems to be like the way this film is cut, it seems to kind of insinuate that this is happening kind of concurrently, so this is happening as...
Yeah. As these scenes happen, there's other scenes happening, and they're both intercut.
At the same time,
and it's mainly Ellen having these like premonitions.
Yeah, so Ellen starts kind of... It seems that she's sleepwalking, or at least she's in a daze of some kind. So Harding, the friend that she's staying with, he calls for a doctor. And then once Orlok's shadow kind of looms over Hutter, that incredible shot that Harry was just talking about, again Ellen kind of seems to kind of sense this. So once Orlok leaves the castle, then once that interaction with Hutter kind of ends, she then seems relieved, but then she also passes out. So it seems that on some level she seems to kind of have a feeling of kind of, maybe it's clairvoyancy, maybe it's something else, but she seems to kind of have this feeling. She's able to sense kind of what's happening all those thousands of miles away.
She's a bit of a psychic.
In Transylvania, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, we get an amazing scene then, and the title card basically says that these 2 lads are bringing him on a raft downstream, totally oblivious to what their cargo is, and you can just see the stacks of sarcophaguses. Cannot believe I got that word first try. And they go down the stream, and yeah, I don't know, it just, again, because it's low budget and it's all shot on location, it just looked fantastic to me that they were actually on like a log raft going down this stream with Orlok and all the coffins. I'm not going to risk it 2 times. And they're going downstream anyway, delivering Orlok So yeah, after we see him going downstream, Hutter wakes up in hospital. A bunch of farmers found him unconscious, basically outside the castle, and brought him to hospital. He wakes up and he basically starts to warn people of Nosferatu, or particularly of Count Orlok. He's a bit of a shifty guy, and he talks about the plague that he's going to bring or whatever. And it's then like a full-on operation across certain ports that you got to check everything, because anything that might contain the plague is dangerous. So they open up just one of the coffins and they kick it over at this particular port just to find a load of dirt and rats. Orlok was not inside that one. And yeah, it's an interesting shot, because I fully thought the first time I watched it, it wasn't this time, but the first time I did watch it, I fully thought he was just gonna like spring it and like kill the guy. But no, got you there. It's actually empty. And meanwhile, this film's version of Van Helsing is conducting experiments, because he is basically just in his day-to-day life.
Professor.
He's trying to prove the vampires are real.
Yeah, Professor Bulwer is his name.
Yeah, and he's conducting experiments on Venus flytraps and various microscopic things, just to basically highlight that if this is possible with these certain things, and vampires do it in whatever myths that you read of them, maybe it is possible, because like this particular thing can more or less turn invisible, and this thing like relies on flesh and blood, and even though like kind of we all do, but it like closes in. I don't really get the Venus flytrap one. I don't really get how that's linked to vampires.
Yeah, me neither. But I'm not scientifically minded.
It's just a cool looking thing.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. It's visually it is cool. So that I guess that's where it's coming from.
But yeah, this guy's basically just conducting experiments. He doesn't really do much in this film, but he does show up a few more times later. So I just thought it was worth mentioning him showing up at this part of the movie.
Yeah, and then cut back to the hospital. Well, I don't know if it's the same hospital that Hutter's in. I think it's implied that it might be, but anyway. No, sorry, it's not, because we're back in the hometown. So yeah, ignore what I just said. Back in some sort of hospital, but it's implied that a patient is raving mad. So we cut to this patient. Who is it? It's Knock. So for some reason, Knock is now hospitalized in this facility. And very similar again to some other adaptations of Renfield, given that this is kind of this film's version of Renfield. He starts to kind of eat flies, it would appear, and then he just goes for the throat of one of the doctors. So he starts to try and strangle one of the doctors. He's then tied up. So he's he's not in the best position. Knock, I think he's pretty much a lunatic. He's full on loon at this stage. But yeah, Ellen then waits, and she's looking very forlorn and lost and sad, obviously, and hopeless with her. So kind of, she's again kind of dreaming or kind of fantasizing about past memories that they have together, or maybe it's future memories. Maybe she's dreaming of what she wants the future to look like. It's not exactly clear, I don't think. But anyway, she then receives Hutter's letter, that we had seen him right from earlier, and we cut back then to Hutter's bedside, and he's like, I'm leaving this hospital, I need to get home as soon as possible. And the doctors are like, no, you can't leave. But he's like, look, fuck this, I need to get home. Orlok is about to move in across the street, and I need to stop this guy because he's bad news.
And yeah, then news spreads even more so that this plague is spreading in Transylvania, and the victims are all having these marks on their necks. So as I said, yeah, Orlok's really racking up that body count. And then cue the iconic ship sequence. So for me, the best part of the movie, this is where Orlok, one by one, just kills off members of this crew on this ship that he is being transported on from Transylvania to Germany. And it's fantastic. So it starts off with one guy who takes ill, and then they start saying that he's gone delirious, and he can see this invisible passenger who hasn't been checked in, but obviously there's no such guy. So then whenever they're finished checking up on him, they all go back upstairs, and then you see in the background Orlok, who was invisible, just become visible again for a second, and then go invisible again. And then over time, crewmates just keep getting killed off until it's just one crewmate and the captain left.
Yeah, they get thrown
And
overboard as well. So every time someone dies
Yeah.
or is suspected of having the plague, they just get thrown overboard, which is pretty heavy stuff, obviously.
Yeah. And the crewmate then, he's like, right, enough of this. Enough of it all said that there's this imaginary guy downstairs. If I'm not back up here in 10 minutes, something's wrong. I'm going to go down and investigate. And he goes down and he starts cracking open one of the coffins and a bunch of rats come out. And then he cracks open another one. And as I said, like Aleister Black, for all our wrestling fans who watch this, he just rises up. It's so iconic.
Yeah, it's
and your man is terrified. And he runs upstairs, up above deck. And he basically just backs off and backs off. He's absolutely horrified. And he backs off all the way off the boat. He falls off and drowns. And we're left with just Orlok and the captain. And as it says, the death ship has a new captain.
Yeah.
Because, Orlok makes quick work of this captain anyway.
Yeah. So again, then a brilliant kind of sequence that intercuts between Hutter and Orlok's journeys to Visborg. I can't remember which. Visborg, isn't it?
Act 4.
Act 4.
Visborg.
Visborg. So again, it's cutting back and forth, which is a brilliant kind of way to show that they're kind of, it's like two ships about to collide in a way, not literally, but
and
obviously.
one has Ellen waiting for him and one has Nock waiting for him as well, so it was also intercutting between the two people, waiting for the two people coming. It's great.
So it's a great piece of editing, and the music is brilliant. The music is so great in this kind of sequence in particular. So yeah, Ellen senses something and then she says he is coming, but again, what I liked about this was that could mean either Orlok or
it could mean one of the two.
Hutter. So it's brilliant. Like maybe she senses Orlok and she doesn't realize it, or maybe she just senses her partner obviously about to come home. Anyway, the ship then arrives into harbour, and then Nock then exclaims, "The master is near." So again, he can also sense Count Orlok's his power, his presence, whatever you want to call it. And then Orlok then, he just kind of this really dark shot where he looks very like dark, very mischievous and insidious, and he starts climbing up to deck. And Nock then go back to the hospital. Nock kills a guard and he escapes. And then we get some more narration then where it says that Nosferatu travelled with the earth soil from home. So you can actually see then Orlok carrying this coffin with a bunch of earth soil from Transylvania.
It's a little bit goofy looking.
Yeah, it is. I can't lie.
It's just big, gangly Max Shrek running through the streets with the coffin under his arm. It's a bit goofy looking. It's the one bit where I was like,
it does make him look a bit.
You've lost your aura, Orlok.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree. Kind of agree with that. But yeah, then Hutter finally arrives home, and obviously him and Ellen embrace. But who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe dark things await for both of them.
Yeah, and they check the captain's log then on this ship, and they find out that there was actually, because they find the ship with the dead captain on it, and it turns out there was 8 crew, including the captain aboard, and there's only one person on it and not a soul alive, so they kind of can't really get their heads around it, so they bring the captain in for further inspection and read his log about how they all went insane and thought that there was a black plague, and how they thought that there was a mystery passenger, and the professor from earlier is there, and he basically was like, right, lads, I'm not joking, we need to lock down everything. Like, everyone has to bolt their doors, everybody has to run and hide, because the black plague is upon us, the death plague is upon us. So everybody goes and they lock their doors, as the town crier basically tells them that, yeah, if you have the plague, stay at home, because if you go to the hospital, you're going to infect everyone, so just die in your home, please. So everybody freaks out at this news, and they all lock their doors, and they all shut their shutters. End of Act 4.
Yeah.
Act 5.
Act 5, then Ellen starts to read the book, which Hutter was reading previously in the film, and he's like, please don't read that. But she just ignores it, and his pleas fall on deaf ears. Yeah. So she, for some reason, seems to be drawn to this book. Obviously, this book about Nosferatu, about the Black Plague, about all this stuff. She starts then to read about a woman without sin giving a vampire her blood. So it's implied that a woman without sin, maybe it's some sort of like virgin thing going on. I'm not too sure.
Yeah, it was saying if a innocent maid makes a blood sacrifice, it's the only way to defeat the vampire. So basically, if an innocent woman sacrifices herself and Nosferatu was to hypothetically suck her blood, it would actually somehow kill him.
Yeah.
Hypothetically. Not that that's going to happen or anything.
No, I don't think so. But yeah, then it turns out that the whole town is starting to blame Nock for the outbreak, and obviously he's just after escaping, so they believe that for whatever reason he's responsible for this black plague.
Yeah, and he strangled the guard as well,
Yeah,
which makes
true.
them think that he's a vampire because of the lacerations on the neck or whatever. So
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So they basically a manhunt begins, kind of similar to what we saw with the monster. I was about to say Frankenstein. The monster in a couple of Frankenstein films that we've covered, Frankenstein and the Bride of Frankenstein. Kind of the locals just absolutely kind of going on the warpath for this guy. So yeah, they kind of one funny sequence where he kind of makes it look like a scarecrow is him, and then they start to attack a scarecrow, that helps him get out of dodge. So it's kind of humorous, but basically, long story short, he escapes, and it would appear that Nock is just about managing for the time being to kind of evade capture. But yeah, then Ellen then wakes up, and once again she seems possessed for some reason. And then this amazing shot of Orlok watching her through the window, and then she cries to her to go and get Professor Bulmer, who's obviously the Van Helsing kind of stand-in for this film, because she wants to distract him. So yeah, she seems to have some sort of a plan on the go here.
yeah, she cries out and says that she sees him across the way every night, and Hutter's like, it's just, you're imagining things, and he looks over and he sees him and he does the whole and falls onto the bed. Yeah, Hutter's a fucking goofball. But anyway, he doesn't really know what to do, and they're all kind of panicking. And then that night, then fast forward a little bit, and she looks outside again, and he is just staring her out of it from across the way again. So she opens the window and kind of lets him know that she can see him, and the two of them make eye contact, and then he comes across, and it's shot really well.
Yes.
German expressionism. And his shadow we just see coming up the stairs, and then his shadow is like drenching over this wall, and then his shadow opens the door to her room, and his shadow looms over her, and you can see the hand, shadow, I've said shadow a few times, haven't I? Go up to her heart and grab it, and she collapses to the floor. And then in a genuinely horrific looking scene, we then see him like by her bedside, just basically sucking her blood, sucking the life out of her.
No, I think that whole sequence is my favorite part of the film. Like again, shadows. I think like that's the one kind of the shot where he's walking up the stairs. That's like, I've known about that shot for years and years. It's one of those shots that almost transcends the film. Like it's so influential to German expressionism as a whole, to kind of the horror movements of the later time periods, etc., etc. So it's like such an iconic shot. But yeah, he seems to have his way with her. Unfortunately, like you said, he seems to be sucking her blood. And then the guard then says that Nock has been caught. So Nock starts to call his master. But yeah, not Orlok. Then I think this is where the film, to me, starts to kind of become a bit abrupt. Like it to me, in my opinion.
Yeah, people seem to say that like films back then didn't know how to end, but like there are films with good endings back then. So
I agree.
I
like
kind of disagree. I just think it is an abrupt ending.
It's very abrupt. Like a lot happens in the space of about 2 or 3 minutes, and then it just ends. So basically, Orlok then seems distressed, and he vanishes into thin air because
he disintegrates.
He disintegrates into thin air. And then Nock is sad, and he wails, "Master is dead, Master is dead." And then Ellen wakes up, and she's like, she starts to be relieved, obviously, that he's dead. She seems to just know that he's dead. So maybe she just kind of senses. She has had these premonitions or these senses.
Well, yeah, she made the sacrifice, so she just obviously assumed her sacrifice worked, I guess.
So, again, it's not exactly the most iconic ending for Orlok, I don't think. It's not exactly something that...
No, definitely not. No, he deserved better.
Happens. I'm not even saying that. It's just, the kind of, it does feel quite abrupt. I can't really say any more than that, but it just feels like it's not exactly an earned ending. It's, in a way, you say deserved better. I know what you mean by that. Like the film, the kind of portrayal deserved
for a character that iconic, I think he deserves to go out in a more iconic way. But no, he just turns into a little cloud of smoke. And then she cries out for Hutter, who comes up and holds her in her arms, and she dies by the looks of things in his arms or something. I got the vibe that she died
I'm not too sure.
because she sacrificed herself.
Maybe
Because it was a sacrifice to kill Orlok, so I assumed that she died because she sacrificed herself, and he did die. So I would assume she then dies from her wounds, but I could be wrong.
To be fair, I didn't read it that way, but yeah, then Bulmer comes in and he says, at that moment...
Yeah, it's somewhat ambiguous, to be honest.
Yeah, that's fair. But again, yeah, quite an abrupt ending which is a shame because I did really enjoy the film as kind of, well, for the most part.
And yeah, that's it. That's the ending.
Yeah.
Nosferatu. Shane, what you think?
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. It's definitely one of the better silent films I've seen. I wouldn't say it's my favourite silent film necessarily. Well, it's not. But no, I can see how influential it is. Obviously, it also has the pretty incredible backstory of being an absolute rip-off of Dracula, which I feel only furthers its kind of iconic status because...
Yeah, I would agree.
Because obviously people know that it's essentially a bootleg version of Dracula. It's essentially like it's just a rip-off. So you're not really supposed to do that kind of thing, but I think it actually does kind of further the Dracula myth as well. Obviously, one of the most... I've said it before, it's probably Ireland's greatest export, or one of Ireland's greatest exports for Bram Stoker's.
Yeah, either that or the Golden Era Film Podcast. It's hard to tell.
Either or. But yeah, so I think, leaving the Irishness of it aside, it's obviously one of the most kind of iconic pieces of literature of the last kind of 200 years. So from that point of view, obviously, I think I've read before that it has over 170 film adaptations when you include obviously the Nosferatu stuff and etc. etc. So like this thing, the Dracula phenomenon just continues to go and go, and obviously this particular adaptation, this unauthorized adaptation, is a massive part of that because I think people are just fascinated by the idea that they just went ahead and made a whole kind of unauthorized version without any kind of permission whatsoever, and then it turned into this whole lawsuit, etc. etc. So it's pretty fascinating stuff, even leaving aside the actual kind of product itself, the actual film itself.
And what did you give it out of 5?
Yeah, so I gave it 3.5 out of 5, which I did really enjoy. Again, mainly aided by the music, and the Max Schreck as Orlok is pretty great. Like his kind of his body, his physicality, his body kind of posture, like you were saying, his body language, etc. It's just everything about his kind of physicality is pretty iconic.
Yeah, I would agree. I gave it 3.5 as well. I really liked it. I think Max Schreck is definitely the best part of this film by far, especially performances wise. I think the direction is good. I don't think it's maybe the best direction out of a German expressionist film that I've seen, but it's good for sure. There are obviously the iconic ending. Obviously there's the iconic scene of Count Orlok coming over to Ellen's, and there's the iconic ship scene. I think both of them are shot really well. Besides that, it's good. It's, again, not my favorite silent film, but it's up there. Like, it's one of my top 5 silent German films. Do I sound like a snob? But it's in my top 5 silent German films. So that's something. Yeah, it's a good proper 7 out of 10 movie. It's a good movie. I definitely recommend it, especially if you're into Dracula. And I don't think you have either. I haven't seen the Werner Herzog adaptation.
No, I keep meaning to watch it.
So I really want to watch that. So yeah, I'll probably watch that at some point between now and when I do see the new one come out. I'll probably watch all 3 of them in the same sort of time period, because we are recording this before the new one has even come out, or at least before it's come out in Ireland, so we don't have any opinions on the remake just yet. But that being said, by the time you're watching it, we will have opinions on the remake, and who knows, maybe one of us will make a video about that. But I liked it. I definitely did enjoy it, and I think it's time that we maybe announce next week's episode.
Yep.
So next week, for the first time on the podcast, we are covering Charlie Chaplin. Yes, we are covering City Lights, because as we said, we are doing the Golden Era Film Podcast through the years. This was our 20s film. Next week is our 30s film, City Lights. For me, it's probably the best place to start for Charlie Chaplin, because I think this is where he was really in his stride, but it's before arguably his best movies. I think like The Kid and A Dog's Life are very good, don't get me wrong, but I think this is where he really kind of got into his own. For me personally, I like his 20s work, don't get me wrong, but I think this, for me, is a great starting point if you have never seen a Charlie Chaplin film before. I'm looking forward to covering it.
Yeah, Charlie Chaplin for me, I really need to get into more of his stuff, similar to kind of silent films in general. But I think The Kid might be the only film I've seen of his. I can't remember. There might be one
Surely
more.
you've seen The Great Dictator, no?
No, I haven't seen The Great Dictator.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I just assumed you had. And you
Yeah,
haven't
no.
seen Modern Times?
No, I haven't seen That's it's like
Right, okay.
it's
For me, Modern Times is probably my favourite film of his, but I haven't rewatched City Lights since I first watched it, so I don't know, maybe I'll like it more whenever I rewatch it for the podcast.
most I've seen too, but I know I've seen The Kid and maybe I've seen another one that I can't maybe just think of on the spot. But yeah, it's like it's really
Yeah.
I really need to get into more of his stuff. So this is, like I said, the whole point of this podcast for me, like a big reason why I want to kind of do it is to watch stuff, to give me an excuse and a reason to watch stuff and force me to watch stuff that I've been meaning to watch, and I just keep putting off,
Yeah.
putting off. So it's a great excuse for me, and yeah, I'd love to get into more Charlie Chaplin stuff. So now's as good a time as any.
Yeah, sweet. And just before we go, Shane, have you watched anything recently that you want to talk about?
Yes, so let me see. I saw Klaus, the animated film for Christmas film, because again we're recording this in December. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I wouldn't say I was a massive fan of it, but I liked it enough. Scarface, I saw the Howard Hawks original Scarface, which I did.
Oh, I really like
yeah,
that.
I really enjoyed it. Trying to get into more Howard Hawks stuff as well, because maybe who knows, maybe I might put out a video about Howard Hawks sooner rather than later. Who knows, depending on obviously how much I can get watched. But yeah, no, that's a really good film. I saw the Alfred Hitchcock Blackmail, which by the way has the distinction of being the first ever sound film, British sound film, and also sound film in Britain. Now he did do a silent version of this and a sound version, and when I put it on for the first 5 minutes or so, I was like, oh, have I accidentally put the silent version on? But it turns out that
There's actually just no dialogue at the start.
Yeah, because the way he wanted to do it was he wanted to kind of ease people into the idea of sound films. So the first 5 minutes or so are literally sound free. They're literally shot like a silent film would be. And then out of nowhere, then someone just talks. So that was very much an artistic kind of choice on his part. Yeah, I was kind of underwhelmed a little bit by it, I'd say. From 1929, it's I think a little bit before maybe his best stuff. Let's say, you know what I mean, his best kind of British stuff. But no, it's worth a watch. There are some nice flourishes in there. What else? The Wizard of Oz. I did rewatch that because I'm trying to try and go and see the new Wicked, but I haven't managed to yet. Anyway, but the one I really
still
wanted,
haven't seen it either.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but no, the Wizard of Oz is great. Like, Toto the dog is just the greatest dog that's ever existed, apart from my dog Molly. But anyway, the one I really wanted to watch, another Howard Hawks the one I really wanted to mention, another Howard Hawks film, starring Cary Grant, starring Jean Arthur, who is great in everything I've ever seen, by the way. Jean Arthur, she's very underappreciated, undermentioned. Only Angels Have Wings, which I was absolutely mesmerised by. I gave it 5 stars. This thing caught me in the feels. It's like, it's one of those films that the way it deals with grief and death is so interesting and so kind of so heartbreaking and so sad, but yeah, it's so hopeful and beautiful in a way. Like, I don't want to go too far down like the path of like kind of comparing to other directors, but one of the reasons I think I'm such a Billy Wilder fan, and sorry to keep harping on about him, is that his films are very cynical, but they also have a really emotional depth to them. And I think Howard Hawks, from what I've seen of his films as well, he actually has a very similar vibe. And I'd say this film in particular captures that because, those last few minutes really caught me in the feels. Thomas Mitchell, by the way, who plays Uncle Billy from It's a Wonderful Life, which we covered a couple of weeks ago, he's in this film, and I dare say he steals the entire film from Jean Arthur and from Cary Grant. He's so great in this film. Yeah, he's
nice.
He's amazing in this film. I've seen him in a few other films, which actually, because I went on his letterboxd and I was like, oh, that's such a good performance. And let me see, while I'm kind of have a mic in front of me, because I hadn't necessarily even realised how many films I'd seen him in, but he's in Gone with the Wind. He plays He plays the father in that, who obviously, maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. Didn't realize that was him. He's in High Noon, which I've seen, which I enjoyed. He's in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. So like, there's a bunch of films that I've seen him in that I probably didn't recognize him in, but oof, he's so great in this film. He's so great in this film. But yeah, the film itself is incredible. So yeah, what a film. Well, what about you?
Yeah, I've literally not watched many films at all recently. I watched Empire Strikes Back again because it's Christmas, so I have to. It's perfect. 5 out of 5, of course. It's amazing. Maybe the greatest sequel in history. Maybe. I didn't say it was. And I watched Remember the Night for the first time, which is amazing.
Yeah,
So good.
really
Absolutely loved it. I think Barbara Stanwyck may be one of my favorite actresses literally of all time, which has got me really hyped for the Frank Capra box set because she's in a few of them movies, so I'm looking forward to watching them. And I watched the Hitchcock movie with
Oh yeah, I saw your Letterboxd review of that. Yeah,
yeah, fucking
that's
oh my god,
Anthony Hopkins, isn't it?
Anthony Hopkins. Yes, sorry, yeah, it's got Anthony Hopkins in it. Absolute dog shit movie. Like it's about the making of Psycho. How do you make that a bad movie? So they just relied on stuff that has since come out as being untrue as the main dramatic points of the film about his wife having a potential affair with the screenwriter, which never happened. They allegedly just like went out for lunch one time 20 years ago and Hitchcock like rang to see if she was okay and she didn't answer. That's all that happened. Like literally that's all that happened. And they made a whole movie about them having an affair 20 years after the fact that that dinner actually happened, even though the movie's meant to be about the making of Psycho. It's just a stupid movie. It makes no. It looks so ugly because they didn't have the authority to actually shoot on the Psycho lot that is still there, so they had to use green screen to have the Psycho house in the background. It's just a bad movie. It's a bad movie. Anthony Hopkins is like an amazing actor. Don't get me wrong. He is just a caricature in this movie. It is bizarre. It is so bizarre. And they make it out as if like Hitchcock just like spent every waking night of his life thinking about Ed Gein. Like he adapted Ed Gein like twice, but supposedly he was obsessed with the Psycho novel,
Yeah,
and he knew that Ed Gein existed.
yeah, because exactly. Psycho is loosely
But
based on Ed Gein. That's it.
this film has like 5 separate scenes where he has a conversation with Ed Gein in his head. Because he's obsessed with Ed Gein. He fucking wasn't. He just wasn't. That's just not true. It's just not true. And it's just, I don't mind when like films make like tweaks or whatever for dramatic purposes, but to make a film and your 2 main plot points are the bits that you're tweaking and making totally like inaccurate, it just boggles my mind. There's very little actual filming of Psycho in this as well, like in comparison to the rest of the shite. It's just a bad movie. I thought it was not good. And I love Hitchcock, so I really, really, really was looking forward to it. And yeah, piece of shit movie. No wonder it flopped.
I feel like movies about Hollywood are often like, there's a reason the likes of Sunset Boulevard are so iconic. It's because like they don't usually get them right. They usually just come across as like fake and like you're almost trying to hide stuff. I haven't seen the film, but like in general, they're kind of films that I think, I try and maybe not steer clear of, but I'm always a bit wary of because they just always feel like a bit of a letdown 90% of the time at least.
Yeah, I was not into it, and I just wouldn't recommend it, which is a shame because like it's literally about Hitchcock. Like I should have loved it, but here we are. But yeah, that's what I watched recently, and I reckon will we wrap it up for next week for City Lights, which I'm looking forward to covering.
Very much.
Yeah, Charlie Chaplin's first time on the podcast. And yeah, if you're still here, please follow us on Instagram. We've gained a couple of followers because I'd be very interested to see by the time this comes out. But I've been posting every day on TikTok, and they're actually starting to get some pretty good numbers, which is kind of funny. So we're getting a bit of a trickle down then onto the Golden Era Film Podcast Instagram and TikTok pages, which is cool. But be interested to see. I think today's one is like by far my most successful TikTok that I've put up. I'll tell you now how it's doing. We'll see. Maybe by then it'll be Doing much better. Oh, it's on 40,000 views. Holy shit.
Shit.
The last time I checked it was on 10. That's...
Well.
I'll take that. Sweet. I was not fucking expecting that at all. Oh, happy days. Well, I'll be posting every day now for sure. So if you don't, yeah, fuck, was not expecting that. Great success. I was talking about Goal as well, like Santiago Munoz. That's so funny.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I'll see you next week for City Lights, and that has been the Golden Hour Film Podcast. But yeah, follow us on Instagram, follow us on TikTok. You can follow us on Twitter if you want to. I wouldn't advise it because I barely ever post on it. But yeah, Instagram and TikTok. Go for it. Thank you very much. I have been Harry Bailey.
I've been Shane Mulvaney.
And that was the Golden Hour Film Podcast. See you next week.